I'm going to give a small presentation, roughly about the same topic. A lot of the things that were discussed in the panel are also the things that I wanted to discuss with you in my own speech. Let's see whether we can get the. Okay, yeah. So the topic in the agenda was a bit different, but I changed it last night when I was like thinking about what should be the angle of this presentation, what I'm going to be talking about innovation management as a bigger thing, and why innovation management is important. It starts from the fact for the bigger organization is that the life expectancy of big organization is getting shorter and shorter. This is the chart from S&P 500, which is listing the 500 biggest organizations listed in the stock exchange. And as you can see that in 60s, the average expectancy for a company to stay in S&P 500 was a bit over 60 years. Today it's around 15, 14 years. 2017, the estimate is that it gets down to 12 years. And the reason for this is there are multiple reasons, and as you can see, there's also when there's the economical crisis, it also affects that. But there are a couple of reasons that are really impactful for this. The one which is quite obvious nowadays is the mergers and acquisitions. So a lot of these actually big corporations are combining forces. And that's why one of them is disappearing from the list as it is. But then the second one, which is more relevant for innovation, is the fact that there's a lot of new companies entering into the market and surprising, disrupting these big organizations. If you have been studying innovation and reading about the case studies, there's a lot of famous brands that we all know, starting from Kodaks to Blockbusters, etc., which once were really the dominant players on the market. And Nokia, for us in Finland, Nokia was one of these as well. And I worked there for 11 years. And you felt that we had a 40% market share that we can't lose. There's no way that anybody can disrupt us. But still it happened. And there's one of my favorite authors, the late Clayton Christensen, wrote quite a long time ago. He wrote a book called Innovator's Dilemma. Who among you have read the book? I really recommend. This is listed as one of the top business books of all time. And what Clayton is discussing around in his book, one of the things that he's discussing is that why big corporations often get disrupted. And it is actually quite surprising that how the disruption happens. It doesn't happen with technological advance or really premium content, premium experience. It usually starts from the lowest level of their business. So if you take car industry, for instance, which Clayton often uses as an example, when Toyota entered the kind of car industry, they started actually from the lowest level of lowest category of cars, which wasn't really interesting for the big car manufacturers at that time. And it wasn't perfect. They had one advantage that they had was the lean manufacturing, so they were able to shorten the time span that it took from car to go through the factory. But the quality wasn't really there, and they weren't really they didn't know how to do the business that well. And the big car manufacturers, they thought that, okay, it's not really a threat for us, let's just give this lower category for them. But while they were doing this in a lower category, they kept learning. And they kept learning, and gradually they actually became better at it, and then they climbed one category higher. And over time, they kept climbing, and last one, which was then going to the premium categories, the Lexus was the Lexus brand when they went there. And now they're competing head-to-head with the other big car manufacturers. And at this moment, actually, what's happening for Toyota is the same thing what they did for other car manufacturers. Now there's Kia, and those companies are coming, and they're also climbing gradually. And then when suddenly the brand recognition is on a premium level. And this is, even though this is quite old theory, it's actually more valid today than it's ever been before. Because today, if you look at, and this is an old chart as well, but if you look at the speed of disruption and the speed of new companies enter into the market is higher than ever before. We have here in beginning of 2010, we have companies like Airbnb, Klarna, Spotify, but if you look at closer to that, this chart takes only us to the 2015. It's quite populated. Obviously, a lot of those will also die. Not all of them will succeed, but there's a lot of companies that start small and work their way up to trying to disrupt the existing players. If you think about Airbnb could have been, if Clayton would be writing the book today, he would probably use Airbnb as an example. It started as an air mattress in somebody's spare room and with a warm breakfast. I'm pretty sure that none of the hotel chains was even considering them as a competition back then. Actually, they didn't even try to compete. They weren't competing with anybody because they were going after the market share that nobody was really addressing. But today, Airbnb is serving 100 million stays, hotel room stays in 1 year, and it's actually the biggest hotel chain in that respect, or hospitality chain, and it doesn't own a single property itself. So the disruption is what Ilari said is that don't wait that you get disrupted. That's something that all of us should also be thinking about. So what is disrupting our industry? And don't ignore the low quality small companies. Often the disruption comes from those. And the role of innovation in a corporation is to avoid the same fate that many of the S&P 500 companies have had. If you keep innovating, then you can succeed against the competition, and it's not that big companies and the management and the boards don't understand that they need to innovate. This is the survey from McKinsey, and there was a recent survey from Accenture, and innovation is definitely on the agenda of all the big corporations. Nobody's denying that you need to innovate, but the ability to actually succeed in innovation is not there. And that's where when you are which was also discussed in a panel discussion, when you are big and you are successful and you have a lot of people who have been working there for years and years and years, it's difficult to change. And innovation at heart is a lot about change and transformation as well. So what are the challenges of corporate innovation? There are a lot of different challenges on why innovation is so difficult in the big corporations. Our panel covered a lot of them. I'm going to focus on three things, on how do we actually tackle these challenges. And the first one is the Three Horizon Framework, which is was launched on 70s by McKinsey. So even this one is not a new one. So I'm really going back to history, trying to understand how the bright minds of the past have actually forecasted how we should act today as well. How many of you are familiar with the Three Horizon Framework? Okay, quite a few. I'll explain it briefly. And so the Three Horizon Framework works so that you divide your business into today's business, then which is the Horizon 1, which is often the phase where most of you guys are working on. Well, maybe in this room when you came here to hear about innovation, maybe you are not working only on the today's business, but a lot of the companies are focusing on their efforts on what's out there today, what's the service this year, maybe next year. Then there's the third horizon, which is often is their strategy and the vision and the mission, the purpose of the company is reflected on there. What kind of company are you going to be in 5-10 years? And all companies usually have a strategy and a vision. And then the second one is the what's next. So what are the next things on top of the existing one, and what are the next things based on the future that we are thinking on, what we should start exploring. And there's a really good book called Lead and Disrupt, which focuses on this same framework, not using the tree horizon as a term, but they came up with their own. But basically, the same theory is there, and they talk about a lot about the kind of the balance between exploitation and exploration. And Ilari was also saying the same thing in a panel discussion, is that you need to be successful on exploiting your today's business in order to have the means to actually explore new opportunities. And when you are exploring new opportunities, obviously you're going to be failing a lot. So, and what Rasmi was saying, that you need to be able to fail cheap. If every failure costs 100,000, you can't fail that many times. And the theory is easy. I've been presenting this for a couple of years now to customers, and everybody agrees that yes, we need to have a balance, that we have our core business, we need to understand where we are going, and we need to work our way there. And in our personal life, we have the same issue. Like we have dreams, which we everybody has, and then we are living in present. But like when you start looking at then how companies actually then work, a lot of the companies actually are focusing too much on today's business. And all the efforts, everything that you discuss is focusing on this quarter and what's happening next. And not so much about understanding where the future is going to be and definitely not doing anything to get there. And these companies, unfortunately, they often are the ones that are waiting to be disrupted. They have no clue what's happening around them. When the disruptive company comes, they are nowhere prepared, and if they start doing it then, it's often way too late. Then there's this is probably a bit more common, that the big part of the organization is focusing on today, and then maybe the top management has some strategy statements on that this is the future and this is what we're gonna be, but there's no actions actually taken on like how do we get there, and this is what we call is that a dream that never happens. And this you can apply to yourself as well, that if you have dreams, but you're not doing anything today to get to those dreams, it really never happens. And this is, unfortunately, this is quite common thing in an organization. And it is a lot about also that there's a clear responsibility here, there's a clear responsibility here, but this is actually some like a no man's land. The balance that what we preach to our customers and what also the Lead and Disrupt is discussing about is that you need to have a balance between these three. And it doesn't mean that you should walk away from your today's business, because this still funds your for your operations. And hopefully, if you think about your S curve, you are still in the when you are your business is doing really well. And then you need to spend time all the time looking for the future. What are the future disruptions that are coming there? Or can you be the disruptor on your industry or in some other industries? And then you need to be spending a lot of time also on exploring the ways to how to get there. And these are the kind of companies that are really focused on growth. And often they are also focused on taking their expertise to new domains, not just focusing on their core business. And then if you think about what are the activities or how to approach different phases. So today's experience is a lot about pain point driven. So you're trying to improve the kind of today's experience gradually by fixing the pain points there. The future is driven by vision. You might have alternative scenarios of what the future will look like. I really recommend looking at Shell regarding scenarios, because they've been doing scenarios for 50 plus years, and they have a really nice website on where they explain how they use scenarios. And then the middle one is the new business experiments, where if you remember what Rasmi said, you need to be able to do experiments or learn really quickly and cheaply. But these are the ways which help this one to actually go there. Okay, the second one that I'm going to be talking today, so if the first one was that you need to have a balance on focusing on today, future, and tomorrow. The second one that I see often that is challenging when companies start to embrace innovation and digitalization is that they come up with a lot of ideas, and then they start innovating around those ideas. But what they forget is that do those ideas actually have a real problem that they are trying to solve? Is there an underlying problem that you are actually trying to fix for your customers? And if you don't have a real problem there, then you shouldn't go there. And I can tell a personal example of this. When I was working at Nokia, and we were doing the multimedia phones and focusing on the N95. And if you remember, the multimedia N95 had this one button for multimedia menu, which was like, there was the app launcher, we had all the application, and then you had the multimedia application underneath the separate hardware key. And we got the assignment on like, okay, we need to design this menu and the functionality of it, and we were really excited that yes, now we get to do something. And then remember, this is now 15 years ago, so it wasn't as easy then as it is now. And we came up with this idea of this kind of carousel where they're like icons, instead of being on a grid format, they were like on a carousel. And we did actually validation on that globally in Asia, in US, and in Europe, and everybody loved that carousel. Everybody said that this is really nice, that you can just rotate that. And we were really happy that, okay, we came up with the idea, which we didn't really have any problem on, but everybody seems to like that idea. And when we launched that, when we started to see the analytics, we realized that nobody's actually using that. And that was an expensive exercise, because building things back then wasn't cheap. So remember that you need to have some clear problem which you are trying to fix, or at least you need to be able to articulate the value what you are trying to create. Scope creep is quite familiar for all of us, and it is also the root cause of like why the software projects fail. This is from the IEEE report, which looks at globally different projects and analyzes why they are failing, what are the things that we can learn from those. And scope creep is actually why scope creep usually happens is that you don't understand you don't have the understanding on what is the problem that you are solving. You're just trying to add a lot of features there. You don't really have focus, and then everything becomes slow and difficult to do and expensive as well. So the second thing to remember is that talk to your customers, understand their pain points, empathize with them, try to find the real kind of root causes where you can provide value. A good example of this is the Kevyt Yrittäjä, which OP launched, and the value that they found was that you can actually save 20% if you go with this Kevyt Yrittäjä in taxes, and they built the service around that. Then it's not second, it should be third. I was quite late last night. So the build, measure, learn, and emphasizes on the learning part. Like when we are doing innovation, we are in the kind of in the core is about like how we can learn, how quickly we can learn. And build, measure, learn is part of the kind of lean startup thinking, and it was Eric Ries is one of the founders of the lean startup thinking, and has written a lot of books. I really recommend his latest one as well. And he said it the best, was that the only way to win is to learn faster than anyone else. And so think about that for a moment, like how can you learn fast and validate that what you are learning is actually correct? And think about what Rasmi was saying, that we need to be really fast, we need to be cheap. And then if you think about if you would be showing statistics on how the success rate of innovation projects is actually quite low. So you need to keep the cost really low before you commit to the kind of big investments. and you need to be pushing quite a few different initiatives, but you need to be willing to kill them as well along the way. So if you think about on like how do we move from the core business to the vision, is through experiments. So this was today's business. That's where the future is gonna be there, but it's still future. The further you look for towards the future, less accurate your assumptions are. And there's always so many variables that can change over time that you can't really say for sure today that in 5 years' time, what will your company be like, or what will you be like? So in order to get there, we form a lot of hypotheses, which in our case, we turn those into experiments. And experiments are the ones where you don't really spend a lot of money on building things. Or I can say that from our past experience, we have done a lot of expensive mistakes where we actually built a lot of things and then we realized that it wasn't the right thing that we built. Like if you remember what I thought about the multimedia menu. So if you understand the customer needs, you formulate the hypothesis that these are the things, you understand the future, then you should do experiments on and learn which are the right things to go forward. And if you think about the role of experiments, is that if this is your corporate strategy or your core business, how it's like evolutionary, how it's going to a certain direction, it doesn't turn really quickly. So if you are trying to find a treasure island with the tanker ship, it's going to be really difficult. But if you have a speedboat next to it or group of speedboats, then you can send those speedboats to different directions to see whether the treasure is there. My son is really into pirates and treasures, so that's why I'm using that. I leave pirates all the time at home. So this is what the experiment should be about. Really lightweight, enough to kind of prove whether the kind of hypothesis is right. And one thing that what has been misunderstood is the word MVP, the minimum viable product. It was coined by Eric Ries actually, and today if you survey 100 people and you ask, so what is minimum viable product? Usually the answer is that it's like when it comes to digitalization, it's something that it's a software that you can actually start scaling and people can start using that. That wasn't the original intention of the MVP. The MVP's role is there to have just enough that you can learn. No more, no less. And if you think about that I just need to learn whether this is a good idea, then you don't really need to build something. You can fake a lot of things. And we fake a lot of things in our business when we are doing experimenting. I'll give a couple of platforms on like where you can do this faking. For instance, Whatsup is a really good platform on where you can mimic experiences and see how they work. We are now doing one experiment for one company regarding an employee experience. We came up with the concept on that this is what we believe in and this is how it will change the behavior. And the end solution would be quite massive software platform with quite a good lot of emphasis on the experience. But it's quite risky to start investing into that right now. So instead of like starting to build something for 6 months and then launch that and hope for the best that it was the right thing that we built, what we are doing right now is that we actually are running a control group where we have 30 to 40 people joining this experiment where we are mimicking the same experience to Whatsup. So Whatsup is a good way to communicate. So we are sending them same information as they would get from the application in the end through messages. Every morning we send a message that yesterday you did like this and this is what you get. This is about gamification. These are the points that you got. And then in the end of the week we give them kind of the summary of the week. And we can mimic that, would this actually change behavior? So if we would have this system, would it have an impact on the business or the experience? And it doesn't really cost anything. There's not a single line of code here. There's just people behind acting as the kind of intelligent AI. the human AI is often the cheapest AI you can use in experimental phase. So think about using Whatsup, for instance, for when you are building experiences for people. Another which is a bit more scalable is that there are a lot of no-code or low-code tools available which you can start use to build experiences. And we have done, for instance, used Shopify or these symbol tools to build websites like Wix, for instance. So you can create a website, kind of a landing page, in a couple of days. You can start driving traffic from social media, running ad campaigns in social media, or if you have an existing business, using those channels to drive traffic there, and see how the kind of message is resonating with the customers. First in social media, what are the different messages that which drive traffic to your landing page? Then on a landing page, you can learn what elements are interesting for your customers. You can test price points, how much are people willing to pay for that, and etc. For instance, for one customer case, what we did, we did first the hypothesis and the concept with them, and they did the business case themselves because they needed to have 5-year business case for that, and they used certain parameters on that this is the conversion rate, this is how much people are willing to pay for that, but that was just a guess. There was no facts behind that. So in order to get the facts behind that, we run this as a kind of campaign. So we had 1 month trial period where we built the landing page, we ran campaigns, and we had the button to buy there. And when people clicked the buy button, then there was a person in behind taking that order. There was nothing automated or anything there. And we could actually validate that is this a good are those parameters correct? After that, it was way easier to go and make the investment decision for the bigger one. So there are a lot of tools that make experimenting really cheap, and it's really if you just start thinking on, so what is it that I really need to learn in order to go forward? And also one thing that I haven't mentioned and is absent from the presentation is that remember that it's if you fail on a first try, it doesn't necessarily mean that the idea is wrong. It might be that your experiment wasn't right, or that you need to change the concept a bit. So be also resilient, that you keep going forward with that. You pivot the idea, but often what I see in a big companies is that they kill the ideas too soon. They fail maybe in the first try, and they kill the idea, and they try something new. And that's also quite expensive way to find the truth. But yeah, so the key takeouts, exploitation versus exploration, have a balance. Don't just exploit your current business and current business models, also explore new business models, new customers. Remember that you need to have the kind of problem solution fit, that are you really solving the actual problem that exists in the market, or are you providing new value for the customers that they appreciate? And then focus on really learning efficiently, cost effectively. Don't build anything in order to learn, at least not in the beginning. Fake it till you make it. The old cliche it's really valid thing to keep in mind.